What is it that actually works to bring about awakening, to bring about Kensho? Conditions make it more likely for awakening to happen, but there's sort of a paradox there where it's actually the letting go of the doer and the seeker, letting go of the knowing mind. There's a sort of humbling of the ego that happens as we enter this space. It's like the character in a VR game. That character never awakens. It's like consciousness awakens from that character. So it's like that character, or the I that I think I am, that sort of dissolves and strips away in this process.
The container is now open. So today, this is a first for us. We're interviewing a filmmaker who, if you listen to The Container, you've probably seen his work. Daniel Schmidt, the documentarian who brought us the Samadhi films, which you can find on YouTube. Go search it right now if you haven't seen them. Sai and I spent months and months and months putting those videos on as we were like especially if it's like late at night and we want something on, just like downloading the information they contain. They're beautiful films and they're so succinctly said, and yet it's so expansive, and it seems to include the full gamut of what's available now for humans to enter the awakening that is unfolding. So we, obviously had to have him on, right? Before we do that, gotta give a shout out to our patrons. They went to patreon.com/thecontainer and they committed to making small monthly donations. And that is an amazing way to help us do the show. But there's also a lot of ways you can support the show. Liking and subscribing, rating and reviewing, all of those things, hitting the bell. We just really appreciate that we get to do this work, like talking to Daniel Schmidt.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, Daniel, hello, and welcome to The Container.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, I think I want to start. I want to dive in to the work you're doing now at the Samadhi Center. I believe like kind of a main focus right now is this ongoing 7-day I Am retreat. That's right. And I want to start there because it really shows this really practical application of just the scope of like awakening practices that you have available. And yeah, maybe you could start by just kind of describing what it is and yeah.
So the films, about Samadhi are sort of, a little signal that's being put out in the world. And, so they're, people come with their questioning mind, what is this? What is Samadhi? And the films are sort of, answering that on an intellectual level, pointing beyond to this direct experience of Samadhi, but engaging with the films, sometimes people can feel something. There can be already sort of a shift starting to happen, but there's a sort of what's been called sadhana, which is Samadhi Part 4 is about sadhana, and so sadhana is the sort of wayless way. It's this practiceless practice that is at the root of all the different traditions. And what I've tried to do is sort of take that out of the traditional settings. And even though I use a lot of the tools from various traditions, I've sort of picked and choose my favorite tools. And put them all together into what I'm calling the 7-day perpetual sadhana, and it's sort of removed it from the cultural trappings and the the usual religious spiritual trappings, and it's just sort of been stripped down to like, what is it that works? That's what I'm interested in, is what is it that actually works, and to bring about awakening, to bring about kensho, and to as part of that, there's a sort of ongoing clearing process, or you could say an embodiment process. So there's that, the conditions that create, or the conditions make it more likely for awakening to happen. But there's sort of a paradox there, where it's actually the letting go of the doer and the seeker, that, letting go of the knowing mind. There's a sort of humbling of the ego that happens as we enter this space. And so it's a sort of paradox, because we, there's this intention to know ourselves, an intention to awaken, but the one who comes, the one who enters the space, the conditioned self, it's like the character in a VR game. That character never awakens. It's like consciousness awakens from that character. So it's like that character, or the I that I think I am, any I that I think I am, that's, a thought or a belief, that sort of dissolves and strips away in this process. So it's a sort of unknowing. You could say it's like entering into the cloud of unknowing. And over time, these conditions within the sadhana structure bring about this sort of settling into presence, you could say. So there's a being here now aspect to it, and there's a surrendering and allowing whatever's going to arise to come up. And it's kind of those two components, the presence and deep surrender, create these conditions for awakening to happen. And that actual flip is, it's the most mysterious thing. So we don't make, the little me doesn't make that happen. There's an aspect that's very mysterious. So it's as if, being or the I am decides to wake up, through any particular vessel. Yeah, so I've incorporated all my favorite things into that. And, so the dyad self-inquiry meditation, and just incorporating some of the, my favorite teachings as well, or pointers, which are sort of pointing beyond doing, so it's an interesting thing. There's a lot of videos and sort of what appear to be teachings, but there's nothing really being taught there. It's just sort of pointing out what the conditioned mind may already be doing, bringing consciousness to what's already in play within the self structure. And then once it's seen, it can then be sort of let go. It can be seen through. So it's a very unique sort of practiceless practice, because there's actually nothing to do. When people come to it, they start out in the mind, with the busy mind, and over time, there's a sort of settling, where that mind, it does less and less, until as they say in Zen, like the body and mind can drop off, entirely. And that's when, we can find out what remains when body and mind drop off.
Something I'm really interested in, how you're describing that, is how the process is actually quite mysterious and almost beyond your ability to do it.
Yeah.
And then there are also tools that have this tendency. I think one of the ways I've heard you frame it is like awakening is an accident, and then these tools make you accident prone or something.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so that accident proneness, like in the technique that we use, the Charles Berner method, um, yeah, that accident that happens is like out of all the tools that I've worked with, I've tried literally every meditation technique and practice, and we've explored entheogens at the Samadhi Center for a few years, all these different things, but that technique, for whatever reason, is the one that I use the most, because he found that if it's done perfectly, there's about a 30 to 33% success rate. So about a third of the participants will have the flip, if they're following it correctly, and the key is really continuous practice. So if the thing that happens with this is, quite often, it can be very uncomfortable facing all of one's everything that's been pushed into the unconscious mind. So so all of the traumas, all of the incomplete experiences that we've had in life, whatever has made up the conditioned self, and all of our dissociated parts that may be in, separated in the unconscious, all of that comes up to the surface. And so it's not an easy, it's a very extremely simple process, but not easy. So there's quite often an unwillingness to go beyond one's comfort zone, or the other big obstacle is that the conditioned mind really loves to know, loves to be in control. So I would say those are the two big things, to allow this this process to fully unfold, is this willingness to go beyond the comfort zone, and the willingness to enter into the space of not knowing.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe that method in a bit of detail? That'd be...
Yeah. Yeah. So there's two participants together, and we just do it over Zoom. So it can be done in person or virtually, and it seems to work well in both scenarios. And so one person you take turns being either a witness or an inquirer, and it just sort of switches back and forth. So the person who is the witness, they just drop into a witnessing space, and they begin by connecting to this intention. They want to know who their partner is. Who is this being in front of them, and there's sort of an understanding that part of knowing myself is knowing who this other is as well. So it's not separate, actually, from my own inquiry. So there's an imperative that's given by the witness. So the witness will look into their partner's eyes and say, "Tell me who you are." And then the person who's doing the inquiry receives that. And this imperative there's something very subtle about it, because to the conditioned mind, it may sound like a question. The mind may think, I'm being asked who I am, and there's an answer. But if you really feel into this imperative, it's not a question, it's a command. So tell me, convey to me who you are, like demonstrate, show me, so there's something, an invitation to go beyond just an answer in the mind. It's an invitation to authentically enter into, this unknown realm. So So the person who receives it, the inquirer, they, the instruction or the technique is first, you intend to directly experience who you are. So there's an intention to directly experience. So directly means not via the mind, not via the conditioned self. And so it's interesting because it functions sort of the way a Zen koan works. The mind hears that, and it's like, what do I do with that? How can I, I can't do anything with that. How can I directly? So so the mind, it brings you to the edge of the mind. The mind will always fail if the conditioned self is trying to do something to experience our true nature. So it's a sort of setup for the mind, basically. The mind will always fail to directly experience who we are. And eventually, through failing over and over, eventually that seeking and that doing, that habit pattern of the mind to be in control will loosen, and less and less of that doer and that seeker will be active. There's a settling that starts to happen, and when that happens, there's stuff starts to come up. Basically, it initiates this clearing process. So the second part of the technique is you share with your partner fully anything that comes up as a result of that inquiry. So absolutely anything. So it could be, memories from childhood. It could be an emotion that's coming up, a feeling, maybe a belief, or maybe there's doubt about the technique itself, or maybe there's just some random anger that comes up. It could be anything, and whatever's hidden in the unconscious will come to the surface, and it's surprising how quickly it happens. I've seen, like in meditation techniques and some of the other modalities, it's more of a slow burn, a slow purification process. But this, within 3 days of doing this continuous practice, it's amazing what comes up. Like people will, have huge trauma releases, and the challenge is that the witness is completely neutral when this is happening. So what allows this to really unfold out of the conditioned self is, there's no reactivity in the witness, because quite often in day-to-day life, when we share something, especially if it's got a charge to it, it's very rare that we have a witness that can just receive that without evaluating, without responding. So we allow this complete communication to happen. So whatever it is that's being shared is received fully, but without any positive reinforcement, without any contraction, and that complete communication is what allows this clearing process to happen. It allows a sort of freedom within the person who is doing the clearing, and so over time, what happens is, as the mind is cleared of these conditioned patterns or samskaras in the ancient traditions, just the habit patterns of the mind, energy is freed, and there's an aliveness that starts to happen in the participants, and there's a felt sense of ease that starts to happen, and more and more the participants will start to feel more like who they really are, so the answer, or not the answer, but the demonstration or the actualization of tell me who you are, becomes this aliveness that's moving through, so it's not an answer to be found, but it's something to be directly experienced through this unfolding process.
there's something so fascinating about how the witness is such a vital component to this practice. Like, I could sit here and look at myself in the mirror and do that same practice you're describing, or I could sit on, like you said, this slow burn of purification in meditation over years or however long, but that there is this magic that occurs when there's another human being who isn't even doing anything. They're not sharing impact. They're not, like you said, contracting. They're not in conversation with, oh, I wonder what that was about, or, but that is just so richly fascinating to me. It blows my mind. It's what, I think drew me to circling to begin with, was that, oh, when we're in relationship, like intentionally with another person or group of people, that we can see our other self, like our true selves in this like, yeah, I'm endlessly excited and fascinated about the potential of being with others, and the power that has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the witness is it's very mysterious. And Charles Berner did some interesting experiments where, there's something about like actually communicating. Like, so if you're a witness, like what can happen with this process is, you're looking into someone's eyes for hours and hours. Like you're doing this continuously from early morning till late at night. And part of the invitation for the witness is to really be listening to their partner, like really comprehending real, you're with your partner. You're not just zoning out. You're not kind of looking through them. You're not just listening to the dialogue in your own head, but you're really hearing what's being conveyed. And Charles Berner discovered, like, if you're just pretending, you're not really there, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. It
No,
doesn't work.
even if your partner thinks you're there, but you're actually somewhere else, yeah, the practice doesn't work. So it's really, there is something mysterious. It's almost like an alchemical, magic that happens in this process, that these communication cycles are there's something that's happening, on a very deep conscious level in this process. And it is very mysterious and very, very beautiful.
And
And there's something about the witness, like just being continuously present. Like if I'm on a meditation cushion, it's so easy for the mind to wander, and to be single-pointedly, continuously present in a very deep way on a meditation cushion it's hard, but
yes,
somehow having this being looking directly into your eyes, it's like you're on the hook. It's like you're forced to show up in the moment in a way that you can still do that in meditation, but it's much harder, I find. Just having that other presence there, it's just a huge help. And somehow it's like a sneaky way to keep people in these elements of sadhana. In the yogic world, they would call that dharana. So you have dharana, the single pointedness; dhyana, the inner surrender. And these are the traditional kind of yogic terms for these aspects of the path. So this dyad container is just naturally creating these sort of conditions. And so it's amazing how Charles Berner actually discovered this in a samadhi state. It's like he somehow it downloaded it from another dimension, or just but it had to be tested out for a long period of time and evolved in its actual fruition. through time. But his initial receiving of it, this insight, came actually from a samadhi state.
And I wonder if you've noticed in in witnessing or reflecting with people, participants who have practiced this, if there's just as much potential for this awakening to occur for the witness as there is for the one that's inquiring, because I have this kind of sense that there are different, like types of people. I don't know, like a psychological makeup or something that is like that single pointedness on the inquirer, like that practice of being the witness and returning to presence here with you, and then the one that's doing the digging, that maybe one serves some more, I don't know, some types of people more than others or something, and so that there's like
Yeah,
that both sides. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. The that back and forth, like the witnessing and the inquiring, at a certain point there's actually a convergence that happens. So so it's really fascinating. Like, so, and yeah, some people will have an awakening, as the witness. So it's not just the inquirer that where that can happen. But the interesting thing is, at a certain point, there is no more witness, no more inquirer. As we move closer to that samadhi state, there, sometimes they, I think it was. I think Ken Wilber said, the witness is the last holdout of the ego. So this sense that there's a separate me, a separate I, and another. As long as we're using or believe that there's a separate me and a separate you, there's this witness, and there's this separation happening. So duality, the whole play of Maya, is the whole setup is based on this sense that there is this separate I, or this separate witness. So even that witness at a certain point falls away. There's something, and this is the great mystery. When we really inquire, who or what is it that is aware, of both witness and witnessed? Is there a possibility to directly abide as that? To be here as that, and so then, at a certain point, when the witness and witnessed fall away, what remains is, you could say, the self, or the selfless self. It's not an object, it's not a thing, but yet it includes everything, and it becomes then sort of a free play of life, of energies, of the one, just playing with itself, and there's a felt sense of that, with the participants. So quite often, when one person experiences a kensho, an awakening, the other participant that's with them will be more likely. It's like they're drawn into it somehow, or there's almost like an entrainment that can happen.
Well, it is them in a way.
And there's a knowing, that deep knowing. So whatever, there can be clear, the clearing, or whatever has to unfold in that. It's like that will just happen organically in that space. Mm-hmm.
It has me think of Rumi. Say, I am you, he says in one of his poems.
Yeah, Rumi knew it.
He did.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Rumi knew it. I think there's something I'm wanting to connect here about just how rich having more than one tool. So if you do the 7-day I am retreat, it's not just a dyad practice. It's also all these other tools, and then you have masters who get to it through poetry and spinning in a circle, and you get, yeah, other people become like Trappist monks, and they just, are very alone and very quiet, uh and then are doing, yeah, just their daily office prayers, and I feel so in touch right now with this idea of having a toolkit, or a series of interlocking intersupportive practices. And I really, we touched on it a little bit earlier, and I really want to go into it because you have such a wide understanding of practices, and then you've created this very curated, like 7-day experience that folds in multiple components. And um, yeah, I'm wondering about that search for tools, and like, yeah, finding the tools that work together. It's such like a meta practice. I don't know. I'm almost lost in it right now as I'm trying to formulate some question to get to Daniel. It's like I'm actually just lost in the sea of tools or something.
For me, what I've sort of seen or come to in this whole process is to see, like all of the tools. It doesn't matter, whether it's a technique or using entheogens or interpersonal practices. All of them seem to be um, cultivating these conditions, certain conditions, and some of them, they'll bring about this clearing process that I was describing. Almost all of these tools will, they're sort of an interrupt in the pattern of me, so that whoever I think I am, the script that's playing out in life. If I start doing a meditation technique, there's an interrupt in that pattern of me, and I start to see that script not as who I am, but as just a conditioned thing that's playing out. And there's a natural sort of coming to that witness, that starts to happen. So I'm no longer caught in the phenomena, but I'm starting to now witness the phenomena. So what used to be me, what I thought was me, now I'm looking at it, and there's this kind of separation. And whether you're using entheogens or all of those different modalities, they bring up stuff to be seen, essentially. So
Yeah.
it's like an invitation to remain as that witness and just allow whatever it is to come up. So so at our retreat, like we use a lot of the traditional techniques, like the Vipassana body scan technique is one that I use a lot, because it can, there's always a lot within the self structure and the somatic field that is operating unconsciously. These patterns of, the body always wants comfort. It's always looking for comfort or pleasure and avoiding pain. And that's happening unconsciously. So when we do the body scan, we start to directly experience those patterns on a deep somatic level. So that's one aspect of what's in the unconscious, is to explore that whole somatic field, and the nervous system integration and all of that is part of that. Also, another tool I use is the noting technique of what's happening in the mind, which comes more from the Sayadaw tradition in Burma, where you just start to see what's happening in the mind. So you start to note, what thoughts are coming up. Is my thought a visual thought? because every thought is either visual or it's auditory, some sort of a self-talk happening, or it's a combination of both. So we can start to see, what's happening in the body, what's happening in the mind, just witnessing it, allowing everything to be as it is, but making it conscious. So these are the types of tools that we use. And there are these different dimensions of the self structure. So I use something that comes from Buddhism. It's called the five skandha model. So you have this sense that there's a body here. It feels like I'm in a body. There's sensation. This raw sensation arising on the body. There's perceptions. There's memories. There's all this phenomena happening, and then there's a part of the mind that it has preferences to all of those things. So this sensation is good, this one's bad, this perception is right, that one's wrong. And so the preferences are really where the I thought is born, the sense of I, like I know, or I believe, and then the fifth skandha is the witness. There's a part of the mind, a part of the conditioned mind that sees all the other operations of the mind. So in the retreat, we're just delving into all this. We're just seeing everything, like all these different dimensions, just seeing what is this mind-body structure that's here. And as we look, we're making it conscious. We're making it more permeable, to the awareness that is just here. And as we make it conscious, there's this dropping away that starts to happen. And so who are you beyond the mind and senses? When all of that becomes truly permeable, when there's no longer a sense of I invested in any of that phenomena, who or what remains at the end of that. And that's it. And that's what no one can tell you what that is. It has to be directly experienced. And it's whatever name we give that, primordial awareness or pure consciousness, it can only be directly experienced. And it's
I think that's such an important point. When I think about the tools, or I imagine, it's like the tools are not actually what's getting you there. There's as many ways of directly experience as there are tools. Like you could have that's almost why, I like how you mentioned earlier that you chose your favorites. Like these are my favorite ones, and they're the ones that I put together into this kit because I have my favorite tools. And I think for me, like in my Pathless Path or in my curated kit, it's more important that I'm like continuing to dive into them than it is that I'm adding more to the set. That I don't know what thing is gonna be, and you could have 100 participants and they have the same 10 set of tools and they have 100 different ways that it happened for them, like very uniquely different ways. And so that's where the mystery lies, is like, that there's a infinite number of ways that turning happens, that flip that you describe occurs.
I love that. To me, I don't know if you guys have done the Vipassana retreats at all, the 10-day. Okay, so at that, the teacher who teaches the most popular version of that, he says that it's about it's kind of like digging a well. All of these tools are like digging a well. And if you just use a tool and you dig a little bit over here, and then a little bit over here, you're never going to dig all the way down to hit the water. So you take take one technique and go all the way with it, and it doesn't. I mean, in that tradition, they say this is the technique, so they have a very particular technique. But what I've seen is that, if the technique is creating these sadhana conditions, if you just go all the way with that tool, that's the key. And if you just engage single pointedly, going deeper and deeper, stripping away, that's it. And I feel like it's like these techniques. It's like going up a mountain. There can be a million paths at the bottom of the mountain, but you're moving towards the same peak. So the closer you get to that peak, the more they're all sort of converging. They're all sort of doing the same thing, and then at the top, it's just being. There's no more technique. You've sort of left the technique behind.
Yeah.
I something to that sometimes, like to stay in the metaphor, when I'm in a really hard scrabble up on the path I've chosen, and I'm like, I just have to do it this way. Don't I? Like,
this is
particularly like when I'm on like day 11 of a really intense magical work, I'm like, this is just, that's the way I gotta do it, don't I? And then I look over at the people who sit on cushions and get it there, and it's like, that looks pretty nice right now from where I'm standing. That looks like a pretty good place to be. Something you said, both like listening to the two of you talking, and this frame of like any tool or technique is fundamentally this interrupt in your conditioned mind. Something I've noticed so much in circling is I have these cycles of renewal where I'll find myself, I like have learned how to circle, and then I'm not really circling. I'm sort of the Jonathan who circles. I go into the Jonathan who circles mode. I kind of accrue habit and knowing and language. Yeah, a little language. Yeah, safety, like airbags to deploy if I ever get in an impact with actual being. And so I then find myself needing to renew and strip away and be like, I've even had times where I'll just make a resolution, like, I'm never using this phrase again, or I'm never, like, this is now banished from my practice. And I really feel you in that, like, oh yeah, because that instinct is because this is supposed to be a practice where we're like working and focusing, but just time on the mat, we end up accruing these habits that really, it starts to feel like going to work, or I don't know, like feeding the dog. It's just like a habit, and then needing these cycles of renewal. I find psychedelics in particular can be overused, but they're so good at renewal. If you don't use them a lot, they're like, they just like create renewal. It's like, boom, you have a lot of renewal all at once. Yeah.
I think what I feel like hearing you say that is, with the participants, there's something that happens with the self-inquiry where, at the beginning it's all new, and there may be these beautiful openings and clearings and all this stuff happening, but as they move through the retreat, then the conditioned self becomes sort of acclimatized to the practice, and what gets reported from almost everybody eventually is it starts to not feel alive or authentic. There's a roboticness now, that you can see that there's something that something like the conditioned self can appropriate anything, even the most beautiful tool, or even meditation. It can, the conditioned self can appropriate that. So that, the noticing of that is part of the practice. The noticing of that is it brings about a renewal, a recognition that, yeah, this is what the mind does over and over and over, and it will create a sort of knowing that, okay, yeah, this is how it's done. This is how I clear. This is how I bring about an energetic awakening. This is how this is what leads to this experience. And so it very quickly, once again, it's a knowing mind. And it's, one of my favorite things in Zen is this idea of a beginner's mind, always coming to the beginner's mind. And so the master, the Zen master is one who knows that he doesn't know, the one who is always in this direct place of renewal, so not operating through, past experiences. How can I be here and now? And those past experiences are, that is the whole five skanda, the whole mind, the conditioned mind that is like a filter, so to me, this whole practice is about, learning to be here in a way that is not mediated by that past, by that conditioned mind. And to me, it's what, I grew up as a Catholic, so I have a lot of, little Bible things that float around, but every once in a while they come up and I see how there is a deep truth and a non-dual kind of aspect to Jesus and his teachings. And there's one that I recall where he was on the road to being crucified, and he turns and he looks at his mother and he says, "Look, mother, I make everything new again." So to me, that's what Christ represents, or what Buddha nature is. It is that renewal. It's this, when we're just fully here without the mediation of that conditioned self, everything is literally new. If I see a tree without language, without memory, without the past, without any knowing, it's like a revelation. It's like, wow, it's new, it's direct. It's a direct experience. And that's kind of what starts to happen, with the self-inquiry. People start to have direct experiences, and I love when people report, it's like, I'm eating my breakfast and I've never tasted like this before. Like, it's like I've never, or I'm having a shower and I've never felt a shower before, like I've never really fully been here in this experience. And
the two words freshness and innocence keep coming to mind, like this orientation of freshness and yeah, innocence. Like this is the first, and then it has me think about children and babies and like what the world is to them, and the wonder and that is available in every single second, or every, like not even in time, but yeah.
That reminds me of another one, that saying where, it's like we have to become as children to enter the kingdom of heaven, and I see it in the dyads. They're like, people go at the beginning, it's like I gotta be awakened, and they're so serious, and there's this, the mind is like on a mission to do something, and as that mind drops away, and over time the mind really gets confused, it gets tired, people, they have no idea what they're doing anymore, but this energy starts to come, and when the mind doesn't have its grip and it's not so serious, this playfulness can start to come through, And I see over and over when that playfulness and that childlike kind of enjoyment of the moment, where you're not trying to make something happen, you're not trying to do something, you're just enjoying what's in front of you, enjoying this moment. That's where the magic starts to happen. It's like, when after people clear, a lot of these aspects of the conditioning, where, as a little child, we get so kind of shut down, by like parents and teachers. We're always, instead of being free and authentic, we're trying to please our parents. So we start to contort, the way we are, to please others, or to look cool for our friends, or whatever it is. But that childlike innocence starts to get shaped by the society, and very quickly, that energy gets cut off, and that's part of what we're connecting with at the retreat. So this beautiful childlike individual starts to come forth. The true individual, which is not separate from consciousness itself. This is the great mystery. Is the consciousness that is here is somehow that individual. It's the individual is the unique flowering or expression of that consciousness. So they're one. It's like I and my Father are one. It's like the the limited time bound part, is allowed to fully individuate, when it sort of becomes permeable to that awareness that is ever present.
And with some sort of lingering sympathy with the conditioned mind, or sense of these parts that they're dogs. When you do dog training, I have been on a big mission with this with my dog, who I love so much. Shout out Flair if she's listening right now. There are no bad dogs. You just need to train them on the right thing or something. Yeah. And sometimes, just hearing over and over how like the conditioned mind's like trying to do good. It's like trying to get the ball, trying to get on the hunt, trying to get it. And and having this sense of real sympathy for how much pain and struggle that it runs into, because we don't really train it to hunt the right ball or something, or it's a good boy though, like it's gonna work, it's gonna keep coming, it's never gonna stop. If you get it trained, like it will never stop serving you. It's so loyal and striving. But I like have a lot of sympathy coming up or something.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That to me is, there's something very important there, where, all these parts of the conditioned self, like I don't know if are you guys into IFS, the internal family systems, or any of that
definitely
stuff? Yeah. So they talk about how, over time there become these sort of exiled parts, and we have these protector parts as well. And so, part of this exercise, it's always like the ego is always separating, the I thought is a separation, of just one thing from another. It's a resistance to what is, so part of this practice is to just see how that resistance is being created over and over. These different parts are being separated. And when we drop that resistance, all of those parts are allowed to be as they are. There's no more resistance to any of those parts. So that individuated being that we are, is just it's all of it all at once. So even the dark parts, the parts that were scolded as a child, it's like my bad parts and my shadow, all of that, we're inviting it all to be as it is, because if that conditioned I is simply, the suffering comes from resistance to what is, so if I'm resisting anything, like those parts, they're made of resistance, they are the original separation. So if I'm resisting them, I'm just adding more resistance to resistance. So the only way out of this situation is just to love what is, to just love all the parts as they are, not adding any more resistance to anything. Invite them
There's
in
also this,
to
like,
be
it's like
seen.
when you zoom depending on how far you zoom the camera lens out, it's like, oh, but gosh, I had to do the resistance like a lot so that I could discover that, like that, even that is just like, yes, like, depending on how, how it's like, maybe I had to do that for 20 lifetimes because it was like, that just was, that is what that piece of the consciousness puzzle looks like that is the part where there's like a lot, and then it really, but it needs like X amount or something, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's some math equation, like that little section actually just needed like a lot of twisting before the release, and then that release is so big.
Yeah, and when you're in it, it's so tricky because the mind, like when somebody's going through a big samskara coming up, in that moment, there's a deep wanting to clear it, to get rid of it. But the paradox is, the way the true unfolding, the clearing happens when we allow it to fully express, fully be as it is. So when you're in it, it's so hard to have that equanimity to fully allow it. There's such a tendency to, the mind is hoping to get rid of it. Still that we want to get rid of these parts that are deeply uncomfortable, but the way in is the way out. It's the hermetic teaching. It's like there's no if we're trying to achieve something, we're trying to get rid of something, that intention of trying to get rid of it it's perpetuating that division, and that's the original illusion. So there's no way out of that except to, through, we see the absurdity of this human condition, and we just have to, we love it, we laugh at it, we just, accept it, this is the way it is, and see. It's almost like, we all of these things are like, it's like you're standing in a pond, and there's this desire to, we feel the greatest peace and ease when the pond is still, so there's all these waves and ripples in the pond, and how do you make a pond still? You just notice that it's you that's moving, right? There's like, the more you do, if you try to smooth it out, you try to do anything with it, you're just going to create more ripples in the pond. So you just see the situation and stop doing what you're doing, basically.
Well, I'm feeling like, as we're nearing the end of our time, I want to give you some time to tell people like where they can go to join an I Am retreat and see your work and get more Daniel Schmidt.
Thank you. Yeah. So awakentheworld.com. Everything is there. The films, all the different events. We have a lot going on just daily. So we have the 7-day cycle. So if you are want to do a deep dive, the 7 days is really powerful. But you can also just come and just dip your finger in a little bit, and we have 4 different silent meditation periods every day, 1 hour sits, just sitting in silence on Zoom. So nothing happening, but just this field of presence. So just sitting with the daily group. There's self-inquiry dyads happening every evening. So you can jump into that. We have training sessions for that as well. Every month or so, there's a new training session. So it's a 3-hour period where we just really go over the technique and give you a good sense of how that works. And and I do little check-ins with the group every week as well. Whoever's going through the 7-day sadhana, so every Tuesday, and there's just a ton of resources on the site. We've been just adding things over the years, and pointers and videos and little teachings. Some of our other favorite teachers who are in the world right now, who a lot of them have been part of the Awakening Mind series. There's pointers to their works as well. And people will just naturally gravitate, to the techniques, the teachers, and whatever it is that's, kind of drawing them. So the one thing I've realized, it's not a one size fits all. It's not like we have the template for awakening. We're just trying to provide a buffet, and you take what you want, what will nourish you, and leave the rest.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much for the work you do. It has meant so much to me in my journey, and I'm just so glad that we get to share that on the container.
Beautiful. Thank you for the work you're doing. And just the synergies are beautiful. I love that you invited me on. It's a slightly different sort of lens or modality that you guys are working with, and for me it's awesome when there are bridges between these different worlds, and I see that we're all moving up the same mountain together. So
yeah.
Amen to that. With that, the container is now closed.